So I want to start off by saying a psalm for, obviously for the soldiers, for Israel, for the hostages, for all of us, Jews worldwide, and for everybody. We should all just know peace. And I was saying the different types of Tehillim, and some of them are very, David HaMelech is writing them, and he'll say, from the depths I cry out, and I've been let down by people, and my enemies pursue me, and those kind of words. And then there are others that are very positive and very triumphant, like 150 is very triumphant, hallelujah, thank you Hashem, we've triumphed. And there's a concept about when you are positive, you create that, you preempt it. So I'm going to actually, before I say the Tehillim, because I'm going to read 121, which is a very positive one, just talk about this concept, because we've just had Pesach, and the last day of Pesach we have a thing called the Mashiach Suda. And it's become quite new now. I mean, quite accepted now. It used to be new that even shuls that aren't Chabad do the Mashiach Suda. The Baal Shem Tov instituted it. And the idea is, why? What does it actually mean? So the whole thing about Pesach is that we came out of Egypt, and Egypt we were in a physical restriction, but also we had a slave mentality. And the idea is, we said, the whole quote is, let my people go so that they may serve Hashem. Everyone forgets the second part, that just go, let my people go. But the idea is that the first Pesach is there to remind us historically what we went through and to see Hashem's strength. Good morning. But it's also for us to know that there will be a future redemption, and it will be even greater than this redemption. So the Mashiach Suda is celebrating that in advance. So the way I can best explain it is, I'd first heard this concept many years ago, that there was, it was actually Rabbi Shochet's sister, she fell into a big vat of boiling water, and she was critically ill. Those days the Rebbe was alive and accessible, and they called and they said, what should we do? And one of the things that he told them to do was to have, when someone recovers, you have a Thanksgiving dinner. So he said, have a Thanksgiving dinner. And they said, bless you, but she's still sick. And he said, no, you're so certain she's going to get well, you have a Thanksgiving dinner in advance. And that's what they did, and she made a miraculous recovery. And so there is a concept, and so I saw it here in Sydney. There was a child that was critically ill, and this is what Rabbi Feldman suggested to this father. And I still remember we were all like weeping in shul, because he threw this big meal that this child, in advance, we were celebrating that, and he did recover. They didn't think he would, and he had a miraculous recovery. So this concept of having Mashiach Suda is, we're celebrating in advance. We are so sure Mashiach's going to come that we're celebrating in advance. And there is this concept that bitochen is, you're acting as if it's already happened. Faith is you believe it's going to happen, but bitochen is it's happening. I'm actually going to. So there's another way I saw someone who did it. There was a diamond dealer in Johannesburg, and he used to, before he did a deal, he'd calculate what he wanted his profit to be, and then he would give tzedakah 10% in advance, because he was so sure that deal would come through, and he did very, very well. And my husband often tells people to do that. You give in advance because you're so sure it's going to happen. The only time that I think I did that really well was when we came on our look-see in 1996 to Australia, and when we got back to Johannesburg, we hadn't put in our papers even. I just put my house on the market. I knew we were coming. We didn't have papers, we didn't have anything, but I just started the process. It's that feeling, I'm so sure it's going to happen, I'm already acting as if it's happening. So this is a very important concept, that we should, if you want something to happen and you really trust it's going to happen, act as if it's already happening. It's a very different place to come from than waiting for it and then letting that decide how you're going to feel. It's a fantastic, fantastic concept. So the Tehillim that I'm choosing, the Psalm is 121, and I think it's a very positive one, and I personally like to say these, and I'm going to read it in English. A song for ascents. I shall raise my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your shadow. He is by your right hand. By day the sun will not smite you, nor will the moon at night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from now to eternity. So it's a beautiful psalm, and it's very much about total trust that Hashem is going to guard us. And these are the kind of words that we should have to strengthen us when so much is going on. You know, the night that Iran sent those 350 rockets, there were a few people that I respect that gave talks about it. And I'll just share what Rabbi Lappin said. I don't know if you saw his shir, but he actually said, coming on Aliyah just for this was worth it. And he spoke about what it felt like knowing that Iran was going to attack. You were there at the time. So this was his experience. And then he said there was a moment of transition. There was a moment of what's going to happen, and then this moment of total faith as it started happening that we're going to be okay. And he said that's actually what happened with Pesach. If you actually read what happened, that's why matzah's got two different names. First they call it the bread of affliction. Yeah, thanks, Andy. And then they call it the bread of freedom. It's the same matzah. So before midnight, it's one thing, and then there's that moment of transition, and you're no longer afflicted, you're now free. And that's often what happens to all of us. Something's going very difficult. I've seen it is that someone can't fall pregnant, and they try, and then like this, suddenly that moment changes. Obviously there was a lead up, but in your life you can be worried about something, and then it's very quick, like Yosef, he's in prison, and then overnight he's the viceroy. So there's that moment of transition. Yeah.
If I could give an example, because this has been in my brain for the last few days. A little bit of a preamble. I watched for the first time my father's testimony from his child.
So one of the tools in Miriam Adahan's in Emet is fears, not facts. Why fear it may not happen. So the idea is that you're worried about something, but there's no evidence it's going to happen. And so the idea is you have a feeling, but it's not a fact. So in CBT terms, we say, where is the evidence? If there's no evidence that that's going to happen, then it's just a fear, it's not a fact. So we talk about fears, not facts. And it helps the present. So when you try and get rid of a thought, this tool is one of the most powerful anxiety tools. When you have a tool like, I have, for example, a patient now, she's got a daughter who's 21, and she's worried her daughter's not going to get married. She's only 21, right? She's got many years to get married. But the mother is obsessed with worrying that her daughter's not going to get married. So this tool, people say don't worry, she'll get married, reassurance doesn't work, because then what happens is when you try and push the thought away, it comes back stronger. The more you try and push thoughts away, they come back stronger. So this tool is, I'm not pushing it away, I'm just going to say I'm waiting for the evidence. It could happen, but I'm actually choosing to say this is a fear, not a fact. And when there's evidence, I'll give my brain permission to worry. So it's very interesting because years ago, Viktor Frankl had a technique he called paradoxical intention. Everyone knows Viktor Frankl for his books on the meaning of life, but he actually was a psychiatrist, and this was a very good tool. And it actually is in the Tanya. So our first chapter, in the Tanya it says in chapter 34, if during the day, he talks about if you're trying to daven and your thoughts come in, and he talks about the marketplace, all the things that are disrupting your thoughts when you're trying to daven. He says what you tell yourself is, this is a valid thought, but I'll deal with it tonight. So that's what Viktor Frankl says. He says when you have a negative thought, you tell yourself, I really think it's a valid thought, and at 8 o'clock tonight, I'm going to give it the time that it needs. And then your brain leaves you alone. But when you say, stop it, go away, I don't want to think this, it comes back stronger. What the paradox is, when you sit down at 8 o'clock, and let's say you've written them all down, and you go, okay, now I've got this list of worries that happened today. Worry. Your brain will not worry on demand. That's the paradoxical intention. So during the day, when these thoughts, intrusive thoughts, we call them, now come into your mind, what if my daughter doesn't get married? What if I'm going to lose my job? What if this? What if that? You say, let's think about it tonight. You set a time, literally, and then your brain will leave you alone. It's a very, very good technique. And the idea is that you don't let those thoughts ruin your day to day, because there's no evidence it's going to go wrong. So we're not talking about living in la la land. Things do go wrong, and if there's something real and there's evidence, you don't go, it's nothing. But so many of our thoughts, people give statistics like 90% of our thoughts really are just thoughts. They come, they go, they're negative, and they say more and more there's negative bias, and we actually have to train ourselves to have a positive bias. So something happens, we immediately think, what if it rains? What if it this? What if it that? And so that the key is to live in the present and to be optimistic, and only when there's evidence, then you give yourself permission to worry and to think, and worry should be more problem solving than just ruminating. So it's very much about taking charge of your thoughts, but not in a stop it and go away way, but just in a relaxed way of, it's only a fear right now, I'll think about it later, and your brain will leave you alone. So this is very important. It's also why mindfulness is very effective, because mindfulness also is about being in the moment. And so instead of, again, when you worry about what if it's going to rain at the wedding, you actually go, when you say stop thinking about it, or people tell you, as I say, reassurance, it will rain, then you'll come up with 10 arguments. But what if it does? Because it's Susan's wedding, it rained, and you bring up all the evidence to prove yourself right. Reassurance doesn't work. So the idea is, instead of challenging that thought, what you just go is, when you start going there, you just bring yourself into the moment. And by living in the moment, you can also be optimistic. So the way I love to there's so many ways of teaching mindfulness, because mindfulness is just being in the present. So I always love just grounding. If I just say, where am I sitting? How am I sitting? Is the chair comfortable? What can I see? What's going on around me? You just bring yourself into the room. And often I'll say to people, are you safe right now? Are you warm? Are you dry? So right now, in this moment, I'm absolutely fine. My thoughts are taking me into the future, which most of the time are fears and no facts. So if you keep bringing yourself into the moment, for most of us, most of the time, we're okay. And that's all we can really control, right? Is the moment. We live it in the moment.
So what do anti-anxiety tablets do to the mind that also almost takes away that worry? Like you seem to just cope. Like what is it working on?
The chemistry of your brain. So your brain's got different systems, and one is a chemical system. So the way neurons work is that we talk about neural loops, but actually and this Freud actually discovered this, people don't know he was a neuroscientist before he became a psychiatrist, is the neurons actually look like this, and there's a jump, and that jump is done through chemistry, they're chemicals. It also is through electricity. So they don't actually all attach, there's chemicals. And what drugs do is it affects the uptake of the chemicals. So there's a space. So the SSRIs inhibit the uptake of serotonin. So what that means is the serotonin pools more in that gap, and that helps you with depression. It calms down, and I'll tell you what it calms down. And then there are others that increase the uptake. So there's certain things that speed up the uptake. So it's all about the chemistry jumping from one to the other. Now, what happens is that the chemistry has a lot to do with how your brain is functioning, and they don't really know that much about it because you can't measure it. You can't take a blood test or a brain test to see if the chemistry is right. But what it seems to do is it dampens the negative thoughts. It controls the way that you think. So a lot of people find that they're not thinking those thoughts as much. It's very much how, interesting enough, something like Ozempic works. A lot of people talk about Ozempic as working on, and this is true, slowing the digestion, and so you feel fuller sooner, but it also switches off the thinking about food. So people who eat a lot think about food a lot. People who are thin, very thin, don't know what this feels like. But people who eat a lot are always thinking about food. So they're always thinking about when the next meal is, or how much it is, or there's a preoccupation, they're in bed and they're thinking what's in the fridge. Food addicts literally are thinking about food all the time, but even so Ozempic switches those thoughts off. You stop thinking about food. It's not only on a gut level. How the mechanism works is not it has to do with the serotonin or the dopamine or whichever the neurotransmitter is, norepinephrine. but exactly how it works we don't know. But it's able to shut that down. The other level that it works on is that it stops the chemical reaction, so physiological reaction. So anxiety is actually mainly a physiological reaction. It's the different stress is in your thoughts. I'm very stressed, but when you start having increased heart rate, or you can't stop your thoughts, or you're sweating, or you've got migraines, or all the physiological responses, that's from your limbic system, from your fight or flight. So that when they add the chemicals or inhibit the uptake, so there's more of them, it calms that, it stops the firing of that. So there are different ways you can work on the brain, and that's the quickest and easiest. But they don't really know exactly how it works, and that's why a lot of it is test and measure, and why some drugs work for some people and some doses. The only problem with the drugs is when you don't take them, you don't have that effect. You haven't really changed your brain. Whereas the other systems, what I've just introduced into my practice, so I'll just change the name of my practice because I brought in a whole lot of non-pharmaceutical treatments, and one of them is called neurofeedback. So that works on the electrical system. So neurofeedback. So how that works is that if anyone ever had a seizure, it's because the brain fires on an electrical level. If you have a little bit of scar tissue, it sets off like an electrical sort of circuit, and you have a seizure. So you can, like if you ever have an EEG, it measures your brain waves, and we know that what a normal brain wave looks like. We know what an agitated brain wave looks like. We know what deep sleep looks like. That's all measured. Your phone measures that. If you're in a deep sleep or not, that's your electrical system, not your chemical system. And so neurofeedback trains the brain to be within its optimal range. And that has long-term effects. So once you've gone through your course of treatments, you don't need it anymore. Whereas the chemistry, you always need it. The minute you stop, you haven't changed your brain. And then you get the neural system, which is what psychology does, and I developed my method, is practice of repetition of new thoughts. You actually, and we do this in Emmett actually, by coming every single week, you learn to think differently. You've actually changed your brain permanently. So you're not relying on a chemical, you're now training your brain to go to the positive bias. Go to the positive bias, and then it becomes that. You actually change parts of your brain through thinking right. So there are different parts of your brain that work. And sometimes you need all three. I'm not excluding any, they're all beneficial and in different ways, yeah.
I actually watched on the news yesterday, they had, it's called now Ozempic moods, for that exact reason. The people have spent their whole life absolutely like freaked out about food and being obsessed, and their mindset is such, and now they don't know how to think anymore. So the Ozempic's taken that all away, and now they're going, well, I'm an addict to food, but now I'm not really, so how do I deal with this?
Fascinating. Where did you see that? I'd love to watch it.
I think it was on 7 on morning.
Wow, yeah.
Sunrise or whatever yesterday, but it was like a little snippet for 5 minutes.
It's so interesting.
And they were just saying now everybody, they're getting depression because of Ozempic, because people are going, well, I don't really know how to think now, because this has been my whole life.
So fascinating. So it's interesting because many years ago, I'm talking about like 1975, I did a paper on this, was called Burdened with Normalcy. And around 1975 or 1974, when I was working at a psychiatric hospital, they developed new epileptic drugs. Now, until then, epilepsy, if you would remember, but epileptics was seen as very strange because they got a lot of brain damage, and you never knew when they were going to have a seizure. It was a real disability that affected people, and people were scared of epileptics. In the old days, they thought they were possessed by demons. It's a horrible thing to watch people. Yeah. And you could see that people were epileptic because each time you have a seizure, you would have a bit more brain damage. And so suddenly, people were no longer having seizures. And they started doing research that the same idea, they didn't know what to do with themselves because now they were normal and they were like burdened with normalcy. The second area they did that was they started improving eye surgery. And I don't know if it was cataracts, let's say it was cataracts, that people were literally almost blind. And then they would have a cataract op and suddenly they could see. And you would think that people would be joyous, but their levels of depression increased because they didn't know how to be normal anymore. So it's exactly that. It's not a new concept, but this is the thing. It's why people often resist change. You think it's obvious, don't you want to be thin? Don't you want to see? But actually, if it's your identity, if you don't get the support to be different, to see yourself in a new role, it's a comfort zone. I call it a discomfort zone. I'd rather stay fat or blind or whatever because I know what to do with the food. That's who I've always been. So it's a whole big thing. I often see that when people start getting well, they self-sabotage. They put that weight back on. They go back to their anxiety because that's their comfort zone. That you can be burdened with normalcy. So just to be aware of it, like as your life changes and you grow and you have less problems, you know, you stop. I've had people leave my groups years ago that would go, you know, what did one person tell me? I don't want to be dramatic. I want to be dramatic. I want everything to be a drama. I don't want to just be calm when someone lets me down. That's what we learn here, right? So that there are very few things, I hope, that really stress you out anymore. Things are just life and we get on with them. But this person said, no, I don't want to give up the drama. So actually, Emmett helps you do that as well. And, you know, someone that I know very well, her husband had a recent diagnosis, and she said, I was so calm about it because I used the tool average. She said, 2 of my friends have also, serious, got these diagnoses. And I know when Les had his heart surgery, Dennis had his, and Louis had his, and I realized it's an age thing. Everybody's having, but it wasn't like, oh my God, it's like, what's happening? It's an average situation. Doesn't mean it wasn't horrible, but it takes away that drama, or it's only me, or I'm special. It's like, so the same thing. It seems like a few of her friends are all getting these cancer diagnoses, and she said, I'm just calm about it. It's just something I have to go through. But someone who wants drama don't want to give it up. They want that drama. So being normal, I call it normal, being what we call average, not an exception to the rule, can be hard if you want to feel. So it actually takes a lot of inner strength to be able to go, my life is actually okay, and I'm just like everybody else, and not to dramatize and not to catastrophize. But it's interesting, you'll see some people don't want to give up on that. It serves a purpose. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I quoted when my mom passed away that always stuck with me, and I said it then, it's like, I'll never forget, I said to her after a month or 2, Mom, are you lonely? And she said, I'm not the first widow, and I'm not going to be the last. And she was on her own for over 20 years. She never complained. She said, it's part of life. That was her answer. Not the first, and I won't be the last. And that, she just got on with it, and that's how we need to think. You're not the first one whose husband had a bypass, and he won't be the last. It's just deal with it without all the ruminations. Doesn't mean it isn't something. We're not saying there isn't. All the legitimate feelings, sadness, pain, frustration, that's normal. But it doesn't have to be with the thinking of I'm different, or it's terrible, or life, God's picking on me, all that stuff.
I call that the noise.
The noise, yeah. It's true, yeah.
I was just the same. I just spent a couple of months in Israel and couldn't get over the normalcy of everything, yet the abnormality of everything. It's geographical and it's this and that. And you never forget for 1 minute, but I just see this, I saw this, I call it not giving to terror, because you sit at home like this, you're part of the terror result, you're part of the collateral damage. And people would call up, how is it? They think I'm good when I said, it's good.
Yeah, that's right.
But
No, that's true.
I mean, it's not good, it's terrible, but it was in that moment.
And actually, what I found, which was interesting, what's giving a lot of people comfort, in inverted commas, is the realization this is not unprecedented. So a few people said to me, I really realized in the Haggadah it says, in every generation they will rise up against us. And people have got comfort from that, which sounds bizarre, but it's true. It's like during COVID, everyone went, "This is unprecedented. That's catastrophic." No, it's not unprecedented. It might have happened 100 years ago, but this idea that it's special and we don't know what to do, whereas a lot of Jews have suddenly realized this is part of being Jewish. It's happened before, and I even heard Noah Tishby on one of the clips I saw saying, "We've won before and we will win again." And I thought that is a good message. Like, instead of cowering in the corner, this is part of Jewish life, and we've always won, and we've always been victorious. It doesn't mean there isn't pain and loss along the way, which is terrible. But the feeling of we've won before and we'll win again, that's very positive. And this is part of being Jewish. Gives people a lot of comfort in a funny way, right? Yes, in every someone called me, she said, the first time the Haggadah really made sense to me. Because we all went, you read it every year, and we thought, nah, we're different. This generation's different, right?
But isn't it enough? Really, do we have to?
Yeah.
Go through it?
Well, that's not what Dayenu means, actually. But that isn't really what that... It is enough, and we should say, Ad Mosai, it's enough. So I'm not dismissing that. But actually, I heard a very nice share about Dayenu. Who did I hear it from? He was saying Dayenu doesn't sit well with Jews, although we say it every year, right? Because it's saying, if you just took us out of Egypt, it would have been enough. And if you had just taken us to the Red Sea, it would be enough. He said, Jews always want more. It's really not a Jewish thing to say, but he said that's the tension we live with, the gratitude for everything along the way. But of course we want the ultimate as well. But the ability to live in the present and go, wow, what happened on that night was a miracle, and thank you. And because we lose sight of gratitude when we're always looking at what we want, the ability to be really grateful for all the miracles we've had. And even in this war, there have been lots of miracles. But at the same time, we ask for more. So that's the thing of Dayenu, to be able to be grateful along the way. And yeah, the way he said Jews don't like that, but it's having, not focusing, when the more you focus on what you don't have, you can't again enjoy the present. But being grateful for everything you do have, say, God, I really am so appreciative of everything. But could I also have that? That's all right. But when you go, I can't be happy until I've got that, then it wipes out all the good that you have. So it's good to really love your life, but say a little bit more. I just want a little bit more. Bring Mashiach. And also be careful what you ask for. Ask for big things. Ask for world peace and Mashiach and peace, and don't get stuck in little material things. You can ask for that as well, but ask. You're meant to ask. Yeah.
Jolene and we went on a mission in January to Israel, and it was actually remarkable. I mean, just going back to what Di said, we ended up being the ones crying and going, oh my gosh, and they going, we good, we fine, this is our life, and we were the ones that were needing them more than they needed us.
Yeah.
I mean, we met amazing people, but everywhere we went, we were the ones going, I can't believe you put people in, how terrible for you, and I mean, this was January, so they like just started and everything, and they all were going, we were fine, and whoever we met was going, this is what we do, this is our life, and it was remarkable. They ended up comforting us when we went there for the other reason.
Yeah, it's true.
I just think if you have got emet and faith that there is Hashem and another world and whatever else, makes life so much easier. Even my little nephew was here from South Africa, and they are extremely brilliant. They're very scientific. They're very traditional and Zionistic and stuff, but they don't believe that. He says to me, I'm so scared to die. Like every day I get to my birthday, it's another day that I'm not going to have my little nephew. He's 16, because I think when you die, you die. They're like scientific. I said, but it's not. I don't agree. I said, like, for me it's so much easier. You enjoy every single day that you can, and life goes on, and you just have to believe in bigger, greater things. That was
I know why,
because they believe in like neurons and
I know, so what does 16-year-old focus on?
he says he loves his life so much, he's so happy and every day, but he never wants his life perfect, you have lots of loves, and Hashem does what he needs to, and it just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, that's true. Teenagers actually are very much, they go through a lot of existential crises. They're discovering who they are and working out the world and all those things. But maybe I'll also just digress a bit, because it's been fascinating to read a lot of the latest books that have come out, because obviously it's my area of interest. So one of the books that I read, written obviously by a Jewish woman, Abigail Schneier, it's called Bad Therapy for Children. And basically what she says, and none of this will be new to you because I've always said these things, maybe not as well as she does, but she brings all the research, is they show over the decades how this over-involvement with feelings in children, the over-focus on how you're feeling, is making children more and more anxious. So everything we're doing is not working, because if it was working, people would be less anxious. But what's happening is young people, we won't even talk about, more and more are suffering from anxiety and depression and needing treatment, but the treatment's not working. And that's the problem. More and more are on antidepressants and on medication, but it's not bringing down the rates. Something's not working. If it was working, the rates would come down. So basically what she's talking about, and this is such a Jewish idea, is that this over-focus on how you're feeling. Do you really, if you don't want a bath, that's okay. You poor thing. That kind of thinking, where children the whole time their feelings are dominating rather than having values, being taught how to behave. She gives an example. She says, she was sitting on a plane and in front of her there were kids yelling. And the father was trying to talk to them and go, well, you poor... And she said, not once did he say, there are 200 people on this plane, you disturbing them, now be quiet. She said it was horrendous. And he was going, you poor thing, and I understand how you feel. And it makes it worse. And she brings a lot of research to show why and how. But she was showing how at schools, like middle school in America, they have these questionnaires. And they have other ratings that they're doing so they can link it to that. And their questionnaires, like they're asking 10-year-old kids, have you thought of self-harming today? Do you ever think of dying? Ask those questions, which some of these kids would never have thought about. And then they have another set of questions where they go, do your parents ever argue? Do you feel uncomfortable when they argue? Do you ever feel your mother doesn't cook meals you like? Like she says, all these suggestive questions that kids would never have thought of. And so we're creating this over-focus of, are you okay? That they're going, am I really okay? And so this kind of counseling therapy, which is just about talking about your feelings, is making people worse. There's a place for it. But this is why other types of therapy, like CBT or other things where it's about action, it's about, that's why ACT is amazing, is living by your values and living a purposeful life. Even if you're feeling a bit miserable, just go and do the right thing. You don't feel like being quiet, but there are 200 people on the plane, and then you feel good because I had self-respect, right? Emma teaches you self-respect, and you feel good. So it's a very, very good book. And it's going to be very controversial because there's $1 billion industry that is feeding this, but we are actually making our young people sick. So that's one of them. The second book I'm reading, it's about by a guy, Jonathan Haidt, H-A-R-D-T, and it's called The Anxious Generation. It's actually frightening. Yeah. He's actually lobbying the American government now to stop mobile phones at school. So what they can show is that since the advent so there's a whole generation that were born from around 2000 that were teenagers, right, 2010 onwards, that are totally affected, first of all, by personal computers, then the internet, but then smartphones. So before that, he says you had flip phones, but then you had smartphones. And he said this is why we have this generation have been rewired. It's got very little to do with parenting. What happened is that parents in the 80s became overprotective in the real world and underprotective in the virtual world. So you cannot have a playground. He shows pictures of playgrounds that we had where kids could fall and hurt themselves. Now the playgrounds are so sanitized that you can't fall. And he shows in America lists of how to play tag. You're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that, and call a teacher if that. It's so supervised that children don't have an ability to play, which is the way brains grow and develop. So they're over-supervised there. But he says parents have no idea what's going on in the virtual world. Nothing. Under-supervised. Kids from age 10 have access to porn. It just comes to them. They're watching. He says, like sending kids to Mars. You don't know what Mars is like. So parents have just allowed their kids to have the internet on smartphones 24/7. And then he shows how mental health has decreased, or has gone. 2007, so 2004 was the iPod. Then 2007, and Facebook. 2007 is when they developed a camera that could take selfies. So they look at these things. Facebook, 2004 was Facebook having likes and shares. So once they could get likes, and children, it's oxygen to get social approval. And then 2007 they had the selfie camera. And from them, the rates of mental health issues, much worse for girls because they need social approval. The rates of suicide gone up like 160%. You can actually see with each invention how it changed mental health, and how these kids' brains have been rewired for anxiety because they're in this world that is totally not safe and they don't know how to cope with it. So he talks about how we grew up, the other generations, is when a baby's born, if you think about it, look at the interaction between moms and babies. You smile, you tease, you tickle, you throw. It's a lot of synchronous in them now. You're pushing and pulling. You roll on the ground. Fathers chuck kids in the air. That's all important, synchronous, and the child learns. Then they have free play, and they learn how to manage conflicts without parents telling them the rules. And they learn how I've got to behave if I'm going to be acceptable, and all those things. And you come out an adult, and you've had years of play where you've learned how to be in society. They go on virtual reality. It's not face-to-face. It's not synchronous. So I can send you a text. You can answer me 2 days later. By that time, I've lost my moment. I don't know how you're really responding. Secondly, it's not one-on-one or one to a few. It's many to many. So I put up my photo. Hundreds of people see it. It's just a whole different world. And they actually don't learn the rules of how to be social and how to interact. It's actually a brilliant, brilliant book. So what he's lobbying the American government is to stop allowing that, at least when they go to school. He's got a few suggestions that kids should be off for 8 hours their phones and have a time where they can learn but also have interactions with other people. So it's really, really scary about, what actually has gone on, and we've created this whole world of anxious people. And that's where we're back to this idea that, yes, they can take medication that can calm them and stop the physiological responses and still the thoughts, but it doesn't really still teach them social skills or how to be in the world. And so they spend more than 8 hours. They might be 8 hours a day at school, if that, but they're spending more than 8 hours a day on the internet, on their smartphones. And parents have no idea what they're doing, or what the effects of the games are, or any of these things, but are so busy watching the playground. It's fascinating. So, yeah, it's really something to think about, managing our own anxiety or our own stresses. And so teenagers today, I'm back to the 16-year-old, they are fed information. Like you can see the universities now, they believe the professors have fed them information to a growing brain. And he says in this book that we know growth spurts. So teenage years are growth spurts, and they're particularly vulnerable to these influences. It's like having a crack in a foundation. And that's what these 16-year-olds are now. They've grown up in a different way, and their brains are differently wired. And that's why you're going, why would he be scared of death? Who knows what he's watching, which games he's watching, what he's being fed on the internet, what social media. We don't even know. We don't even know what his algorithm is bringing up. Yeah.
This is somewhere I think how they do it. you've got school age kids and they come home and you say, oh, how was your day? What did you do? What was that? It's like a really big, open-ended question, but if you